welcome back to the deep dive. You sent us this stack of sources that, it reads less like academic research and more like the blueprint for a massive geopolitical thriller.
It really does.
And honestly, we were hooked before we even got to the good stuff. The narrative is just,
Yeah.
it's huge, a true global conspiracy.
Mm.
It goes all the way from these remote, freezing research stations in the dry valleys of Antarctica
Yeah.
up through these clandestine nuclear deals hidden away in the Scottish Highlands.
And all coordinated from Zurich, from an art gallery of all places.
Exactly. It is so high stakes, so multi-threaded. We're talking about illegal nuclear transport, corporate espionage.
Yeah.
And all of it is set against this terrifying backdrop of a potentially fatal solar storm.
It's an absolutely extraordinary piece of source material, because it's a masterclass in weaving all this complex global infrastructure and these really fragile international agreements into a single kinetic plot.
Right.
But, as you know, our mission here is to look past all the action and the drama. We're going to look past the light strike vehicles and the helicopter chases.
As cool as they are.
As cool as they are, yes. We want to understand the real-world infrastructure, the actual treaties, and, the inherent vulnerabilities that make a conspiracy on this scale even possible.
So this isn't just a story about heroes and villains.
No, not at all. This is a deep dive into the systemic fragility of the geopolitical and technological systems we all rely on, especially when you get to the most remote corners of the world.
Absolutely. So we are going to unpack in detail how this one isolated scientific research base became the absolute epicenter of a conflict involving, the illegal high-level transport of nuclear material. Sophisticated international espionage.
And a celestial event, a solar flare, that at the same time is threatening to cripple global communication networks.
We're looking for the points of failure in the global safety net. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. And let's start right where the narrative demands we do, on the ice, where, the rules of civilization essentially just evaporate.
So we start our deep dive at this base run by a company called Uplink International. It's known as Cold Corners. And the source material gives us this incredible immediate visual contrast that it perfectly highlights the ambition of the place. Cold Corners is described as looking like a working model for a future interplanetary colony.
It's all sleek and futuristic.
Yeah, configured with 6 of these sleek, linked rectangular pods, and they're sitting way up high on these jackable stilts. The whole design is meant to literally rise above the snowdrifts that are constantly building up.
And that modern, almost utopian vision is immediately set against the background of McMurdo Station, or McTown, as everyone calls it.
Which is the reality of living there.
It's the sprawling industrial reality, yeah. McTown is just a mix of temporary canvas huts, Quonsets, barracks, and these massive rust-blighted steel fuel tanks. It's purely functional.
So why did Uplink build something so different, so ambitious?
Well, Cold Corners had a very specific purpose. It was designed as this all-in-one satellite ground station, a space technology center, and, crucially, a human habitability lab.
A habitability lab.
Yeah, it was designed to simulate the kind of long-term, self-sufficient life that you would need for deep space interplanetary settlements. So it really represents the height of technological ambition, trying to overcome, the harshest natural environment on Earth.
It sounds like a fortress, really. But for all that cutting-edge tech, the isolation and the strict rules governing the continent, they immediately create a vulnerability.
They do.
And this leads us directly to the first major incident, the missing team out in the dry valleys. We have this guy, Alan Scarborough. He's an ex-Marine, saw combat in the Gulf War.
So he's a serious operator.
Very serious. And he's leading 2 scientists, Peyton and Bradley, and they're tracking their lost robotic probe, the Scout, out in the place called Bull Pass.
And this is exactly where the very strict environmental rules of Antarctica stop being a scientific safeguard. And they become a critical vulnerability that the bad guys can exploit.
How so?
Well, the dry valleys are one of the few truly ice-free areas on the continent. They're designated as a scientific resource of profound importance. So to preserve them, all the field workers have to adhere to this multinational code of conduct.
Okay.
And that code explicitly prohibits the use of any wheeled or tractor-belted vehicles on the ice-free ground.
Wait, so they can drive their snowmobiles on the lake ice, but the second they hit solid ice-free Earth, They have to abandon the heavy machinery and just walk.
Precisely. They have to walk. It's a critical self-imposed restriction. It was formalized in a multinational code that's been observed for 3 decades.
Wow.
So they are voluntarily restricting their own mobility, their speed, and, critically, their defensive capabilities, all in the name of environmental and scientific preservation. They're operating on the ultimate honor system in a region where enforcement is, well, it's non-existent.
It's almost like a sacrifice then. They're trading their immediate safety for long-term scientific integrity.
That's a good way to put it.
So Scarborough and his team, they were on foot, towing their supplies, when they find the rover's trail. But the tracks they abruptly evaporate at this notch in a rock face. They were immediately trapped and completely vulnerable.
And the ambush that follows just highlights the absolute cynicism of the attackers. The team is attacked by men driving a light strike vehicle, an LSV.
And we need to pause on this, because an LSV is not just a Jeep.
No, not at all. This is a high-mobility, fast-attack military buggy. And this one is equipped with mounted guns. Its presence there is a blatant, massive breach of the Antarctic Treaty.
A huge breach.
So Peyton is killed instantly by the machine gun fire. Scarborough and Bradley, they're seasoned veterans, they recognize the futility of fighting a superior armed force in this open environment where they can't even drive their own vehicles.
So they surrender.
They make that calculated, just heartbreaking decision to surrender. They step out with their hands linked, and they're executed after they comply with the attacker's orders.
Unbelievable.
And this act immediately transforms the situation from, a technical failure, a lost rover, into an illegal, high-priority international security investigation. And that's led by Uplink's security chief, a guy named Pete Nimec.
The sheer audacity of it, though.
Yeah.
Using a military vehicle with mounted guns in a supposedly demilitarized zone, it just highlights the core problem here, doesn't it? The geopolitical impossibility of policing Antarctica.
Right.
How can you possibly enforce an honor system when the stakes are this high and the area is this enormous?
I mean, the numbers are just staggering, and they explain the strategic decision perfectly. Antarctica's total land area is 5.5 million square miles.
That's, what, double the size of Australia?
Double Australia. And even during the peak summer season, when the population temporarily quadruples, you are still looking at an average of 50 to 150,000 miles of open space per person.
That is truly astronomical. There's no possibility of effective surveillance or enforcement.
It's virtually impossible to patrol. And the issue is compounded by the foundational agreement, the Antarctic Treaty. It imposes a continent-wide ban on military bases, on military maneuvers, and on any kind of armed enforcement.
So when the source material says the treaty relies on an honor system?
It means that the international community has collectively agreed to just look away. This vast, empty, demilitarized space is the perfect operational vacuum. It's the perfect cover for highly illicit operations that require absolute secrecy and, zero external interference.
So if a military vehicle breaks the rules and kills 2 scientists, who's going to catch them, let alone launch an armed counter-operation?
Exactly. The treaty itself prevents the necessary military response.
So the political vacuum created by the treaty, that's the environment's most critical vulnerability.
Yeah.
And if the isolation of Antarctica provides the perfect physical cover, then we have to look globally to see who supplied the political and financial cover.
That's the right pivot. We have to move from the physical isolation to the global web of influence that you'd need for this scale of crime.
So on the uplink side, the motivation for pressing forward, even after this horrible loss, it's deeply personal for the founder, Roger Gordian.
Yes, it is. He's driven by the memory of 2 of his people, Arthur and Elaine Steiner. They were maintenance technicians who were killed years before during a terrorist attack on an uplink compound in Russia.
So for Gordian, this isn't just about corporate survival, it's a moral imperative.
It really is. He sees pushing ahead and securing his operations as a testament to their love and a direct rejection of the violence that took them. It's an ideological war for him, not just a business one.
And to manage the operational security crisis, he's relying heavily on Pete Nimec, the security chief.
Right. And Nimec's loyalty is intensely cultivated. We find out he received a reconditioned 57 Corvette Fuelie, which is one of the most exquisite and scarce cars in the world, unexpectedly delivered to his condo.
That's more than just a bonus.
Oh, absolutely. It's a personal demonstration of respect and loyalty that binds Nimec tightly to Gordian's mission. And we see this deep reciprocal loyalty as being essential to Uplink's ability to fight back against this global cabal.
Okay, now for the adversaries, the Albedo Consortium. This whole criminal enterprise is orchestrated by a man named Gabriel Morgan.
Mm.
And he's operating out of this beautifully restored medieval guild house, which also, of course, serves as a high-end art gallery in Zurich. He's described as the prime mover, the architect of these complex, high-stakes plots.
He uses the veneer of legitimate wealth and culture to hide a criminal genius.
Exactly.
Morgan is the brain, but it's his network that provides the infrastructure. And this isn't a street gang. He has assembled a high-level crew of behind-the-scenes movers.
People so deeply embedded in critical government infrastructure that they can, what was the phrase, trip political circuits their superiors cannot afford to touch.
That's it. And look at the list. Constance Burns, she's the head of the UK Waste Division.
UK Atomic Energy.
Right. Then there's Olav Lankefell from Norway's Energy and Petroleum Ministry, and Fedor Nikulin, an advisor to a Russian governor and a former colonel in the Strategic Rocket Forces.
That is a trifecta of vulnerability right there. You have nuclear waste disposal, energy infrastructure, and Russian strategic military knowledge. Why is their specific positioning so crucial for Morgan's operation?
Well, they control the logistics of sensitive materials, and they have the political ability to look the other way. Burns, for example, she's the key to the entire Scottish plot. She manages the records for highly sensitive UK nuclear waste.
And Lankefell.
He has access to Norway's energy logistics, which, often overlap with Arctic and subantarctic maritime routes. And Nikulin provides the necessary deep black market access, military coordination experience, and intelligence regarding things like high mobility vehicles and weaponry.
He's probably how they got the light strike vehicle.
Very likely. They are the levers that make the global movement of nuclear material possible without any high-level political scrutiny.
And this conspiracy takes immediate chase in Scotland with the uranium trafficking plot. It's initially uncovered thanks to the efforts of a man named E.W.B. Cameron.
A principled Scottish official.
Right, who started looking into suspicious activities at the Cromarty Firth plant. And this plant was in the process of decommissioning prototype fast breeder reactors.
And that plant itself was massively important to the local economy. It was also a top contender for hosting a future JET tokamak fusion laboratory.
Which means money.
A lot of money. £25 million per year in local wages, a significant chunk of the gross district product. So if these allegations of illegal activity were proven true, not only would that expansion be canceled, but the plant's very operational license would be threatened. Cameron's diligence was entirely justified.
But the crucial piece of evidence that broke the whole conspiracy open, it was derived through forensic police work.
Right, D.I. Gorey's investigation.
Yes, his investigation connected Cameron's death, a hit and run by a stolen transport truck, to a plant supervisor named Edward McKay. Now, McKay was later murdered by his wife in what was presumed to be a murder-suicide.
A very convenient cleanup.
Very. But before he died, he'd realized that the official waste transport records were fundamentally falsified.
This is the genius detail that makes this whole section work, and we really need to slow down and unpack it, because the mechanism of the fraud is simultaneously complex, but it relies on a very specific, very mundane public works detail.
The Linfirth Bridge.
The Linfirth Bridge. McKay didn't have to follow the truck. He just needed a calendar and the official transport documents. He realized that the transport records indicated the trucks carrying the highly radioactive spent nuclear fuel would have crossed the Linfirth Bridge during the few days it was publicly known to be completely closed for repairs.
Wait, hold on. So the documents were perfect, the signatures were genuine, the cargo manifests were correct, but they failed to check a simple public construction schedule.
Exactly. The logistical failure was microscopic, but it was fatal. Since the trucks couldn't have crossed the bridge on those specific dates and times, the documents listing the transport routes and checkpoints were definitively not genuine.
Wow.
This tiny, verifiable flaw, the bridge closure, exposed the fact that the nuclear material had not gone on the legally recorded route. It had been rerouted and replaced with dummy materials. This little crack in the system exposed the massive operation run by the Albedo Consortium.
That is incredible. It is always the simplest logistical truth that brings down the most complex conspiracy.
It is.
And the conspiracy quickly covered its tracks, which just shows its high-level reach.
Oh, indeed. Uplink's Glenn Lowry, who was investigating an attempted hack on their own email servers, intercepts a highly damning message from the UK system. It's signed CB.
Constance
Burns. And it's an order for Cameron's elimination for £100,000. This confirms that Cameron's death was a professional hit orchestrated at the highest level of the consortium, a calculated move to shut down the investigation before that bridge detail could be shared.
So, With the Scottish end of the operation exposed and then covered up, the illegal transport of the uranium proceeded south. Trace that journey for us, because the logistics of moving nuclear material across the globe without detection are they're insane.
They are extreme. The operation shifts to the sea. There's this ship, the Valkyrie, a legitimate cargo vessel, and it deviates far from its charted course past the Cape of Good Hope and ventures into the treacherous Antarctic Ocean.
And the actual transfer.
It was executed outside South Africa's territorial waters under a black, moonless night sky to avoid any satellite detection or coastal radar.
And the cargo itself, these
Yeah.
casks.
The rad-insulated casks containing the spent uranium were moved by a mechanized winch onto an ice-strengthened fishing trawler. This vessel was registered to a shell company, an Argentine firm, which was a calculated measure to evade both British and South African sovereignty and throw off international investigators if the vessel was spotted later.
And how did the trawler navigate the dense, unpredictable pack ice to reach the mainland? That's got to be the most challenging part of Antarctic maritime travel.
They leveraged publicly available information used by legitimate researchers. It's brilliant. The trawler used weekly ice distribution satellite maps, the kind composed by the U.S. Navy and NOAA for the safeguard of legitimate research vessels, to navigate around heavy flows of pack ice and reach the Ross Ice Shelf.
It's a brilliant, low-tech operational security measure. You're using open-source, benign scientific data to enable a high-level crime.
Exactly, hiding in plain sight.
So once they hit the ice shelf, the cargo was moved onto land vehicles.
Yes. Once the transfer point was secured, the hot cargo was offloaded onto these large, rubber-belted Caterpillar trucks. And these aren't standard utility trucks. These are heavy haulers designed for low-pressure traction. They conveyed the material deep into the continent's interior, linking directly back to the initial attack site in Bull Pass.
Which makes the implication undeniable.
Undeniable. The material needed to be hidden or stored or maybe even processed in a place where no one was looking. And that brings us full circle to the profound geopolitical weakness of the Antarctic Treaty.
The logistics of this operation are breathtaking. But you're right. They rely entirely on the idea that political powers will prioritize looking the other way. And Morgan himself, he understands that weakness intimately. In a meeting with his consortium partners in Zurich, he introduces something called the zoo event to explain why covert operations are so successful in Antarctica. This is a fascinating bit of history, or maybe alternative history, woven into the core of the sources.
The zoo event is the philosophical justification for the entire operation. It refers to a specific, really controversial incident in September 1977, the Vela 6911 satellite.
That was a U.S. program, right, to detect nuclear explosions.
Exactly. It was designed to detect clandestine atmospheric nuclear explosions anywhere in the world. And it registered a classic double flash, the signature indicator of an atomic blast. The yield was estimated to be between 3 and 4 kilotons, and the location was near Buvatoya Island, which is a remote Norwegian-claimed island just inside the Antarctic Circle.
And this wasn't just a satellite signal, was it? There was other evidence.
No, it wasn't just the satellite. The signals were corroborated by seismic data and, crucially, U.S. Navy acoustic hydrophone signals, which picked up the unmistakable sonic imprint of the blast. All the physical evidence pointed toward an actual unauthorized nuclear test.
But the Carter administration, caught in this political vase, they're dealing with the gas crunch, the looming loss of Iran,
Right.
desperate to stabilize key alliances, they ordered academics to publicly refute the findings.
They did. They claimed it was a sensor malfunction, a meteor collision, or even a weird interaction with a passing fish shoal. Anything but a nuke.
They went into full denial mode.
Because they desperately wanted to avoid confronting their allies. The suspicion centered on South Africa, potentially with covert Israeli participation, who were known to be developing atomic weapons at the time. Confronting a nuclear test by an allied nation, especially within the context of the Cold War, was just deemed too politically damaging.
So the political consensus was, it's better to maintain the illusion that the Antarctic Treaty is functioning perfectly and the continent is demilitarized than to deal with the explosive truth.
That is Morgan's core insight, and it's his cynical genius. Western leaders actively ignored a confirmed nuclear test within the Antarctic Circle because confronting it was not politically advantageous. It was easily dismissed, blamed on a quirk of nature, precisely because it happened in this vast, demilitarized zone.
So what's Morgan's takeaway for his group?
It's chilling. He says, if a nuclear detonation can be ignored by the global powers, surely a clandestine mining and trafficking operation involving uranium can be covered up indefinitely. The zoo event is the perfect historical precedent for Antarctic secrecy and denial. And Morgan argues it proves the great powers value the political illusion more than the military reality.
That reframes the entire conspiracy. They're not just committing a crime, they are exploiting a known, long-standing political weakness.
Precisely.
And to further ensure uplink and international investigators stay distracted while the operation moves forward, Morgan initiates several calculated diversions. We're moving from nuclear physics to art history.
Exactly. And this is where the sheer absurdity of Morgan's operation comes into focus. We meet a character named Deutz, or Alata, a genius art forger who Morgan had hired previously.
An expert in authentication.
A true expert. He once spotted a careless, minute trick in an otherwise competent Giotto forgery, saving Morgan a fortune.
And Alata is now the subject of an Interpol investigation.
Yes. He is pursuing 14 small Picasso pieces related to the famous Guernica exhibit and, strikingly, the Catholic Stations of the Cross. And Nesselier, a sharp Interpol detective, and D.I. Gorey's former partner from the Scottish investigation, is pursuing him.
So the worlds are starting to connect.
They are. She suspects he might be the forger, or maybe that he acquired one genuine piece and is trying to authenticate his copies. The art world provides the perfect high culture, high visibility distraction from, uranium casks moving across the Southern Ocean.
And the subplot just culminates in pure chaos. A high-stakes retrieval mission that shows Morgan's ruthlessness and ultimately his psychological weakness.
Right. Morgan learns that Constance Burns, his key logistical partner, has been arrested in Zurich by Swiss police working with Nesselier. Recognizing the entire Albedo network is compromised, he flies immediately to Castello Danelli on Lake Maggiore to retrieve the paintings.
It's the moment operational security just collapses into personal greed.
It is. Morgan is so obsessed with possessing the genuine art, or maybe protecting the credibility of his forgery network, that he compromises his own escape. He narrowly escapes Interpol choppers and, more dramatically, Swiss Air Force F-5E fighter jets.
And the detail about the escape is terrifyingly visceral. He shoots his own pilot so he can seize the controls and attempt this desperate solo landing on the castle's ramparts.
And the pilot, flustered by the chaos, had just relayed the message about Burns' arrest, meaning Morgan knew the Swiss were closing in on him. It's pure desperation.
And the ultimate irony of the whole art plot is revealed by the forger, Ilata.
Yes. Alata, observing Morgan's desperate, high-risk retrieval effort, realizes that Morgan wouldn't risk death, the Swiss Air Force, and his entire consortium's fate for fakes. Morgan's extreme actions prove the Picassos were genuine.
So Ilata, the genius forger, had actually signaled Interpol himself. It was a self-authenticating trap for the genuine art.
It was. Morgan's desire to possess the art overrode his operational security, collapsing the diversion right as his core mission in Antarctica was supposed to be peaking.
So the world stage diversion has failed, and the geopolitical vacuum is about to be filled not by rival governments, but by a force of nature.
Exactly.
Shifting back to Antarctica, as Nimec prepares to launch a new security response against the attackers, this massive external existential threat emerges. The sun itself. This is where we are introduced to the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, or SOHO, which is a joint NASA and European Space Agency probe.
SOHO is orbiting at what is known as the L1 Lagrangian point. For those unfamiliar, you can think of the L1 point as this gravitational sweet spot. It's 4 times farther out than the moon, a location where SOHO can essentially stay put and keep a constant, uninterrupted eye on the sun.
It's our early warning system for solar weather.
It is, and what's remarkable here is the fragility of this critical piece of infrastructure. SOHO is operating 6 years beyond its projected mission life.
Wow. So it's a testament to its engineering, but it also signals that our primary irreplaceable watchdog is old and potentially vulnerable.
And its vulnerability is about to be tested. ESO's instruments, specifically the Michelson Doppler imager, which measures wave motions and magnetic fields, detect a severe, highly asymmetric concentration of sunspots. The sources describe it visually as a spreading, blotchy rash on the hidden face of the sun.
And this indicates an impending X-class solar flare.
Yes.
An X-class flare is the most powerful type, right? So what is the actual threat analysis for this event?
The analysis indicates that though the flare is likely brief, its impact, a massive coronal mass ejection slamming into the Earth's magnetic field, could cause absolute chaos. It carries the risk of a high-altitude electromagnetic pulse, which would disrupt modern telecommunications and, crucially, electrical power grids worldwide.
And for a remote location like Cold Corners, this disruption could be devastating.
Absolutely. If communications are fouled, they risk a long spell before relief arrives, especially since their satellite ground station is their only link to the rest of the world. The flare provides Morgan's team with the perfect operational window.
And the Albedo team capitalizes on this perfect storm, literally. The approach of the storm, described locally as a cyclonic cell or a ERBI, forces McMurdo Station to call Condition 2.
Which enforces flight restrictions and grounds Nimec's planned helicopter overflight?
It provides the ideal cover for the sabotage team to attack.
It does. The sabotage team is led by a man named Burkhardt, a highly trained veteran with a Swiss Special Forces background, a fitting detail given Morgan's base of operations. Burkhardt is recognizable by a perfect crescent birthmark, described as the child of the moon.
And he leads his men on snowmobiles toward the base during the witch-out conditions, using the near-zero visibility to mask their approach.
Right.
Their target selection shows meticulous inside knowledge, which just confirms Nimec's fears about internal assistance. They head straight for the desalinization plant dome.
So why the desalinization plant? Because Burkhardt knew that the driving snow had completely cataracted the security cameras on that side of the dome, rendering the token perimeter surveillance useless. They are highly professional, moving into the teeth of the wind, carrying Sturmgehörs.
Standard Swiss assault rifles.
Yes, carried in biathlon harnesses for easy mobility. They're ready for a firefight.
Let's talk about the weapon they deploy, because it's not standard demolition. They use something called pyrotechnic social nanocomposite. What is that, and why is it so destructive?
This is a critical detail. It's a far-boundary, high-tech incendiary material. It was likely sourced through elite black market channels, facilitated perhaps by Nicolin's military contacts. It's essentially a high-tech thermite.
Okay.
What makes it uniquely destructive is that it generates temperatures far hotter than standard military thermite, and it can be placed with incredible precision to maximize damage to complex machinery.
And they use it to target two specific components.
Yes. The material is used to destroy the flow pump motor and the low-pressure PVC pipes of the desalinization unit. The pump motor instantly burns out, the pipes melt and leak. It causes catastrophic, critical damage that severely limits the base's ability to produce fresh water.
This isn't just an inconvenience. This is an attack on their most fundamental life support system.
Exactly. In Antarctica, water is essential, not just for drinking and cooking, but for cooling machinery, cleaning instruments, and maintaining the hydroponics labs necessary for long-term habitability.
So what's the impact?
The expected output of fresh water is reduced to almost a quarter of regular capacity. This single act of sabotage transforms a temporary weather crisis into a severe long-term habitability crisis. It forces cold corners into triage mode, and it creates a fatal distraction.
So, faced with fire and armed attackers, Pete Nimec organizes the Sword security team to suppress the fire and fight back. He's relying on veterans like Mark Rice, a former Army Ranger who saw action in Somalia and Colombia.
And you get that fleeting, beautiful, almost comical detail that contrasts the severity of the crisis with the mundanity of life on the ice.
Hal Pruitt.
Hal Pruitt, yeah. The base's Ice League baseball fantasy general manager, whose job suddenly switches entirely to crisis management instead of, debating fantasy trades. It just grounds the high stakes.
But the seriousness returns immediately when Nimec's team is forced to engage the attackers directly. They are required to manually lock their VVRS rifles into man-killer mode. What is the significance of that technical setting?
Well, the VVRS, the variable velocity rifle system, it's designed to fire non-lethal rounds like beanbags or low-kinetic rounds for security work under civilian contracts. It prioritizes incapacitation over death.
So man-killer mode.
That's the full high-velocity lethal setting. Forcing them to switch to this setting signifies that the rulebook has been thrown out. They have officially transitioned from corporate security to a full, desperate, military-grade defense against highly armed mercenaries in a location where military action is supposedly banned.
The Cold War on the ice has just gotten very hot.
And lethal.
The attack on the desalinization plant was just far too precise, targeting those cataracted cameras. And this leads Nimec to correctly suspect he has internal help.
Right.
He soon identifies the traitor. Russ Granger, the NSF helicopter pilot who had been observing Scarborough's team in Bull Pass and was intimately familiar with Uplink's operational procedures.
Granger had initially agreed to help Nimec search the dry valleys, but he was actually planning to lure Nimec into an ambush to eliminate the security chief and cement Burkhardt's control.
What was his motivation? Was it just money?
Well, it wasn't purely financial, at least not at first. It really stemmed from this deep-seated resentment against the uplink corporate system and just the general impersonal bureaucracy of the whole Antarctic scientific establishment.
He wanted a parting shot.
He felt a deep need for a parting shot against the system, yeah. A kind of permanent, freeze-dried monument of spite, much like the old VXE6 ice pirate crewmen used to talk about before leaving the continent forever.
So his psychological resentment makes him vulnerable to Morgan's financial persuasion. And he attempts to kill Nimec during their scheduled reconnaissance overflight.
He does. Granger steers the helicopter into a remote, heavily crevassed area he calls a hag's mouth, a deep crevasse just the right size to swallow a man whole. Granger pulls a Beretta on Nimec, expecting an easy execution.
But Nimec, the former Marine, he turns the tables.
Yeah.
He uses the environment and his own gear as an improvised weapon.
Exactly. They grapple, and Nimec, in a moment of brilliant combat improvisation, swings his metal snowshoes, which were strapped around his shoulder for traversal, to deflect the Beretta just as Granger squeezes the trigger.
So the round misses him.
The round harmlessly blasts through the helicopter canopy instead of into Nimec. He disarms him, and the threat of internal sabotage is neutralized, confirming the critical inside assistance that Burkhart had received.
So with Granger's now compromised intel, Nimec is finally able to lead a strike team back into Bull Pass. They use uplink helicopters, relying on the cover story that the NSF helicopter was just on a harmless reconnaissance mission. This ensures the enemy doesn't panic and disperse too soon.
And this final confrontation plays out under this increasingly dramatic, almost apocalyptic sky. The aurora australis, the southern lights, they're intensified by the solar activity, a result of the X-class flare's particles beginning to hit the atmosphere. It creates this beautiful yet terrifying light show backdrop.
And Burkhart's men, witnessing this intensified aurora, they're terrified. They describe it in German as Der Gott des Krieges,
the god of war. And this moment just underscores the fact that the entire Albedo Consortium is already collapsing around Burkhart. Morgan is dead, Burns is arrested, the global plot has failed, he knows his mission is a catastrophic failure.
And Nimec's arrival confirms Burkhart's worst fears. Nimec makes a critical discovery at the bottom of the notch, where Scarborough's team vanished.
Yes. He finds heavy earth-hauling equipment and large haul trucks. And this proves the operation wasn't just about destroying a rover or stashing a team. It was actively engaged in a two-way street.
They weren't just bringing things in the uranium casks. They were pulling something heavy and substantial out of the ground, too.
Which suggests either deep storage or clandestine mining of the uranium itself.
So the game is fully up. Burkhart recognizes the comprehensive failure, but refuses to retreat. He positions his men on a bitter, windswept terrace for a final, futile stand against Nimec's team.
Nimec confronts Burkhart in a newly uncovered shaft, the entrance to the enemy's main operation. Burkhart, realizing Nimec understands the full extent of the catastrophic failure and the complete collapse of the Albedo Consortium, from Zurich to Scotland to the Antarctic, chooses a final, grim act to deny capture.
He commits suicide. His final words to Nimec are in German.
Die Ironie des Lebens, the irony of life. It's a final, dark commentary on his own spectacular fall from a highly decorated Swiss Special Forces veteran to a mercenary dying alone in a secret Antarctic mine shaft. All for a plot that ultimately failed due to a combination of meticulous police work, a loyal security chief, and cosmic weather. The collapse of the conspiracy is total.
So if we pull back now and summarize this entire intricate thread, the connections are stark. And they expose these global systemic vulnerabilities.
They really do. The meticulous fabrication of waste transport records in Scotland, relying on that mundane detail about a bridge closure, facilitated the illegal transfer of highly sensitive nuclear material.
That material was then covertly shipped to and either stored or mined at a secret Antarctic base, operated by this cabal of high-level government actors.
And protected by Swiss mercenaries, coordinated by Gabriel Morgan.
And the success of this high-tech global crime relied fundamentally on two things failing at the same time. First, the huge geopolitical vacuum created by the Demilitarized Antarctic Treaty, which barred any armed intervention.
And second, the simultaneous threat of a catastrophic, naturally occurring X-class solar weather event. That crippled legitimate communication and provided the perfect whiteout cover for the decisive, targeted sabotage of the base's life support.
The aftermath is immediate and critical. It reflects the severity of that infrastructure attack. Cold Corners faces a severe, immediate freshwater crisis.
Yeah, they can only get up to about a quarter of their regular freshwater output in the coming days. They're relying on desperate cannibalization of parts and intensive manual labor, all while the persistent threat of solar flare interference looms, risking all of their remaining communications.
And politically, the aftermath confirms the very vulnerability Morgan had gambled on. The U.S. State Department is left in a complete quandary.
Mm.
The base is technically a commissioned government outpost that came under enemy attack, yet Article 1 of the Antarctic Treaty explicitly bars military activity. So the U.S. is left without a ready legal mechanism for an armed counterstrike or even a proper offensive search and rescue operation.
They have enemies on the continent, but international law, however fragile, binds their hands. It forces them to rely on civilian security teams like SWORD to fight a military threat.
Which brings us back to you, the learner. You've seen how geopolitical vulnerabilities, specifically the reliance on international trust in a demilitarized zone, and complex technological dependencies,
Whether it's the sleek desalinization plant or that aging SO probe at the L1 point,
can turn a scientific outpost into the flashpoint for a conflict involving nuclear material and global crime.
we often rely on sophisticated overlapping systems and these complex international agreements to manage crises and maintain order in our world. But when these systems fail simultaneously, whether it's due to natural phenomena like that X-class solar flare, or organized targeted sabotage in a location governed only by an honor system, what critical, simple resource becomes the first and most immediate casualty?
Consider the cost of maintaining the illusion of order. How reliant is our modern, highly networked world on the delicate infrastructure that currently protects the most remote yet resource-rich places on Earth?
And more importantly, if the global powers chose to ignore nuclear blasts in 1977 to maintain an illusion, what current massive threats are we actively choosing to ignore today? Because confronting them is simply not politically advantageous. That's the provocative thought we leave you with today.